Hello, and I thought it would be interesting to do a bit of theory analysis today, but with a small twist, because on YouTube there is an endless succession of very, very good theory analysis channels for jazz, and just to recommend one, for example, Dex, which I'll put as a link, who does incredibly detailed analysis of these kind of chord charts, and there's a variety of other jazz people up there. Rick Beato's done a load of stuff as well. Scott's bass lessons, he's just put up a 4-hour jazz course, and I can see he's doing sort of analysis. So I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I want to basically put a kind of personal spin on how I tend to teach it, and actually more how I tend to think about it, first of all. So just to run down a few sort of basic ideas about how generally theory would be taught. First of all, if we have a real book, which I've got right here, and we are plonked right into the onto our piano or whatever, a lead sheet like Stella by Starlight, we have to be able to analyse it very, very quickly, especially if it's a piece that we don't know very well and we're on a bandstand and someone sort of like gives you something to sight read and you've just got the chords, you don't necessarily know the piece itself. So the analysis of chords and actually understanding how to play over them is very, very important. It's not the be end and end all. I've always thought that kind of the sound of jazz is first, and if you can learn by ear, that's the kind of key, but the theory stuff is really important, and in order to be a good jazz musician, you really do need to be able to analyse a lead sheet very quickly. There are a number of ways you can go about it, first of all, which I'll just introduce you to. Then I want to talk about my own kind of like theory about how to think about this. So first of all, number one, if I was playing through these changes and I was getting students or myself sort of like through this kind of thing, I might just look at chord tones first of all, just, you know, the root, the third, the fifth and the seventh, and possibly going up to the ninth. And that doesn't really require necessarily chord scale theory particularly, although obviously you kind of need to know the scales in order to actually extract the chord tones from it. But chord tones is a really good way, and that would be what I call playing the changes, and then obviously adding things like enclosures and sort of chromatic passing notes, and that slowly moves you through into a kind of like bebop style language. So chord tones is one thing. You should be able to play each of those all the way through fairly fluently across the sequence. The second thing would be actually learning each of the actual individual modes and scales, and to be able to look at, say, E minor 7 flat 5 and think of maybe the E Locrian, you know, with the natural second, or the Locrian, followed by an altered scale, followed by Dorian, etc., etc. So playing the full scale is also another thing, and you should be able to, again, map these modal scales through a piece of music. But what we're really looking at when we're thinking about the theory is really how all of these chords perhaps relate to the original key, for example, or if there is, and this is my kind of like take on it, a harmonic narrative that we can actually follow and think about to make the piece actually come to life. And this is, I think, the really important thing, and this often gets lost in theoretical analysis, where we're always trying to think about, you know, what scale goes over what and what position the chord is diatonically and so on and so forth. But there's also, of course, we've got to think really musically, and actually this should be almost like an art form itself, actually understanding this theory in order to create a really beautiful sort of narrative-driven solo. So just to quickly go over the usual kind of things, and again, I'm not reinventing the wheel, because you can just go straight onto other channels where they've done this straight away, and Dex is one of the really good ones, like I say. So for example, we've got the Berkeley method, and the Berkeley method would be really to kind of relate these chords to the particular key that it's actually in. So for example, Stella by Starlight is in the key of B flat major. Subsequently, I've written out the chords, diatonic chords connected to B flat major. So we've got B flat major 7, C minor 7, D minor 7, E flat major 7, F 7, G minor 7, A minor 7 flat 5, and back to B flat major 7th. Each of them are obviously numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. And then we can basically look at how some of these other chords relate to each of these diatonic chords. For example, we can see straight away E minor 7 flat 5 would be the minor 2 chord of the 3, so a minor chord, E minor 7 flat 5, which then goes to the 5 chord of the 3, to the D minor 7, which is the 3 chord, okay, which is kind of strangely sort of work. Actually, it doesn't go to 3 because it goes to a tricky little kind of like little joke instead of the C minor 7th. But basically, this would be a 2 of the 3, 5 of the 3, and then that would be that. And the Berkeley method would continue through basically looking at how these different chords basically relate either to the key or shifting keys sometimes when that doesn't seem appropriate. Again, that's all been done, and there's a very, very good book on that, of course. The Berkeley method of jazz harmony, which again is well worth going through. And you should again understand that kind of side of things. It's very, very useful because it means that you can actually work out what the appropriate mode is for the actual chords that we're looking at. For example, if I don't know this is a 2 and a 5 of the 1 chord, for example, I might play like an Aeolian, for example, for the minor chord, and instead I need to know what the actual mode is. And this particularly trips people up when we have, for example, a minor 7th chord in a progression, and it happens to be a 3 chord, for example, which would be a Phrygian, and people play, say, a Dorian over it, and it just doesn't sound right. So if you don't understand this kind of side of things, it's not very helpful in terms of actually playing the appropriate scale. The next one, which is what I might call survival, is this. How I would think about it is very big key centers very, very quickly. So when I see a sheet like this, particularly before I'd learnt the Berkeley method, the way I would think about it really is to very, very quickly work out what keys each of these are in. E minor 7, A7 would be a D minor. Now I'm in B flat major. This will be a 2-5-1 in E flat major. This again is a kind of like is actually a backdoor 5 chord which leads us into B flat major 7th. We're now back in B flat major, which is our kind of tonic key. We're now into a kind of 2-5-1 in D minor. For me, this is another backdoor 2-5 into F major. All right. Then we've got another 2-5, which would have been into D minor, but then actually goes into another minor 2-5. And this is what you want to, again, be able to spot very, very quickly. Then we've got a 5 chord, which leads into a 1 chord here. And again, I'm not thinking now necessarily diatonically with relation to B flat major, but really how are these modulations are occurring in order to be able to improvise. And I want to kind of be able to do that almost instantly when I see it. I want to just run through it, see key centers and all these connections really. This is another backdoor 5 progression to a B flat major, and then we've got a series of descending minor 2-5, another minor 2-5 down a step, another minor 2-5, and then we end on a major 1. Okay, so this is what I call survival, which is really, again, a very, very quick method of just thinking about the key centers that we're actually got in a piece of music. Now, some pieces obviously don't modulate much at all. So something like Autumn Leaves just stays, for example, if it was the first chords were C minor 7, B flat 7, B flat major 7th, then we would basically be in B flat major throughout the entire piece, and it just goes to the relative minor in the other section. But most jazz standards work around these terms of basically a series of modulations from a particular key center. So that's, that again has been analysed, and there's enough YouTube videos and books about that kind of thing. So looking at my own sort of idea around this in terms of what I call the narrative approach, I need to know the first 2 steps in a way, really. But when I think about the chord sequences and where they're actually trying to head, that's what I'm most interested in. Where are the actual resolutions that are occurring that my lines might lead into? So the first 2 chords, for example, the E minor 7 and A7 are clearly a minor 2-5, but lead instantly into something that is now wanting to move somewhere else. They don't allow it to resolve, which is what makes Stella by Starlight a really interesting, ambiguous tune, which was actually based on the film of a ghost story, The Uninvited. So then we come to the F7. Again, the F7 feels like it should, lead to B flat, but it doesn't. It now leads to another unresolved chord, which now wants to move somewhere else. Now, this is what I mean by the narrative approach, really, which is trying to see where the piece kind of wants to lead you and understanding the harmony. So the very first resolution that we actually get is technically here, E flat major 7, and that's my lines when I'm actually constructing a solo or thinking about this. It's not wanting to resolve yet, but it's going to rest here, okay, but just as you feel like it's going to rest, of course, it now moves itself into the next idea, the A flat 7, one of these kind of backdoor progressions, into B flat major 7. Now this again could be a resolution, and again I might think of this because we do have this A flat 7 to B flat major 7, okay? So there's a resolution there, and there is another resolution to an extent here. So again, I can think of my lines. Again, this one here is another resolution that I can think of. So I'm constantly trying to look at one chords really within the actual sequence. And those are the things that almost you want to put sort of magic glasses on that allow you to just instantly see the one chords that you're kind of leading into, because a really good jazz solo is always going to be about this idea of tension, which leads to some form of resolution. And within all of these kind of earlier jazz standards, that tension to resolution is very, very obvious all the way through. Here again, we've got a lovely unresolved 2-5. Again, if I just play these things. So we've got the E minor 7 flat 5, A7 altered, but then again it moves into another sort of form of tension. And just as you think that that's going to possibly resolve, it actually hits what I'd say is one of the peak chords. And I think in every single jazz song there is always one particular chord that the song is really moving towards. Now it might be different, that's a slightly subjective thing, but for me that shift to that G altered is to me the kind of peak of the song, because it then starts almost bringing itself back down again harmonically. So the C minor 7th is a sort of resolution. Then it's going to move into that A flat 7, which moves us back into the B flat. And you can kind of hear how that is beginning to sort of now retract back. So it's almost like the piece, from a narrative perspective, starts quite ambiguously, and just as you go to one resolution, it doesn't do it, it doesn't allow it, so it moves into another idea, and then it moves into another one. It gives a hint of a resolution, but shifts straight away into another kind of harmonic flow. It then again sort of tries to resolve itself, but moves straight into these other ideas. But it keeps sort of like, there are moments of space where you can kind of rest, but the big one is it's leading up to something in the actual song. Now some songs might have two, but I would say most songs have like one peak chord that you should kind of understand and sort of get used to seeing. So once I hit that kind of peak in terms of the narrative, I can now start winding back down again. And then we've got this really lovely kind of finish idea where we've just got this descending. And it sort of beautifully sort of just wraps itself back up through these series of kind of descending sequences. And again, this gives you know, a really nice kind of idea of, you know, like a series of kind of sequences that you could kind of play out, for example, or you can just kind of wander through it. There's various ways of doing it, but basically the main point about this is that every single harmonic sequence that you analyse has got a sense of narrative which you want to try to understand. So you want to move past eventually the ideas of trying to think of them in terms of, you know, 2s and 5s and all this kind of stuff. That's really important, but that eventually wants to kind of become just part and parcel of how you see it instantly. And then what you're trying to see beyond that is, where is the harmony actually trying to go? How is the harmony actually telling a story? And then how can you then emphasise that story through your own soloing? So that's kind of the approach that I take in terms of jazz theory and analysis. Thank you.